So I guess I have some explaining to do this morning. We've been talking about Peter the last 2 weeks. First in comparison with the Canaanite woman. And then last week we had Peter as he made his confession that Jesus is in fact the Son of the living God. You remember that? And this week, Peter, it seems, gets shut down this week pretty hard by Jesus. Jesus rebukes him. And while it seems like it's been a week since Peter's confession until now, because for us it has, if you were reading along in the gospel, it's actually the very next story. It's within the same chunk. And so, Peter gets it right. You are the Son of the living God. He made that leap that was pretty profound for him. But then when Jesus begins to tell his disciples what awaits him, Peter says, Lord, this cannot be. And I get Peter. I love him for saying that. Because if my friend were to say to me, it's my time, I'm not long for this world, I must go, I think in my own grief, I would surely say the same thing. And I would do so with something that Peter didn't have. Knowledge of the resurrection. Jesus is still very much alive, right, in front of Peter when he's making this statement of, Lord, you must not go. And so we rag on Peter's foibles all the time, but I understand him, and I think you do too. After last week, I saw firsthand what it's like for you to be given 5 minutes to tell someone that you love goodbye. And my friends, when Peter says, it must not be so, that has to probably be the most gentle way that statement could be uttered, if it's said out loud at all. Last spring, I remember heading to Tennessee for Lexi's graduation. And as a part of the graduation festivities, there's a closing Eucharist, and the Dean of Students, he usually preaches on that day. And he was wrestling with this question of Peter's on that day. Asking sort of, in his own prayer, I think, why Jesus came and had to die. Like if Jesus was God, why couldn't he have just figured out some other way other than the cross and stayed to love us and heal us and forgive us and to be with us and make all things new? Like, why did he have to die? And he's doing this in a graduation ceremony with Peter's question in his mind. And he's doing so after the cross, after the resurrection. He's been through many a Good Friday, many an Easter. And it seems for him and for me some days, Peter's question remains. And you've heard Peter's question before this morning too, about why? If you think back about a month ago, we celebrated the Feast of the Transfiguration together. I think Mark preached, actually, that day. And if you recall, Peter, James, and John are on top of this mountain with Jesus, and Moses and Elijah showed up, and Peter looks at that, and he's like, hey, it's good that we're here. We'll build you houses, and you can stay. Do you remember that? Obviously, Peter didn't get the rebuke or learn from the encounter this morning. But instead of a rebuke on that day, a voice came from heaven that said, "This is my son. Listen to him." And Jesus, we learned, has much more to say on his way to Jerusalem and in Jerusalem when he gets there, which is the next part of the story after this. But for now, for today, Jesus says in the wake of Peter's rebuke, right, "If anyone wants to become my follower, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For to those who want to save their life will lose it, and for those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life?" Shouldering the cross the way that Jesus tells us, I think expects us to do, bearing it, has me thinking that like Peter, I'd like to use the wood for something else. Perhaps building a few houses on a mountaintop. And that's because dealing with denial is hard work. Because it has us face that which we often don't want to see. But Jesus says, will you all just listen to me? Look at it this way. If you want to save that life, you'll lose it. But if you deny yourself the illusion that it's all about you, you'll find something else out. You may even find your own life. Self-denial gets a bad rap from the get-go, as it's not a part of our culture's image of the good life. But the self-denial to which Jesus calls us shouldn't be seen through cultural eyes as the opposite of self-fulfillment either. Just giving up things in our life won't make us Christian. What is difficult for us to understand, I think, is that what we cannot understand on our own terms is the way of the cross. A way that looks like death, but is actually the way that leads us towards life. And I think it's because it is a life that is not focused on the self at all. What does Paul say in his letter to the Romans today? You bear with me. I think it bears worth repeating. Because it's a message, I think, that goes side by side this self-denial thing. Paul writes, "Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them." One thinks of Jesus on the cross saying, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And Paul goes on to say, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Live in harmony, do not be haughty, associate yourself with the lowly. Don't claim to be wiser than you are. Do not repay anyone for evil. Live in peace. Never avenge yourself, but leave room for God. For vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I will repay. If your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Right? He says that. That good, that ethic that Paul speaks of is entirely other-oriented. I mean, what does discipleship look like? What does a discipleship look like that has us blessing those who are after us? Blessing those who curse us? If you ask me if the church meditated on Romans 12 a little bit more, I think the world would be a different place. And that is because oriented towards such action is precisely what Jesus is talking about when he says, deny yourself. Deny yourself wanting to curse your enemy. Deny envying those who rejoice. Rejoice with them. Don't minimize someone's loss. Weep with them. Deny yourself enmity. Deny yourself falling into the trap that vanity uses to blind you. Deny yourself seeking out fellowship with only those who agree with you. Deny yourself sealing yourself off in some cocoon so you don't have to face the world. Face it. Deny yourself vengeance. It's not yours. The cross is. And the deceiver never thinks we as Christians will use the cross the way that Christ did, as a way to crucify our hatred, as a way to crucify our apathy, as a way to crucify our own self-interest. Jesus says, why not be free of that? You're free to lose that part of your life. Don't you think? If you do, you'll probably find, I don't know, something divine.